From the nation's capital in Washington, D.C., the Congressional Report, with your host, Iowa Congressman Tom Latham.
This country is based on farms, on small businesses, and creating jobs and opportunities. That is the lifeblood of this nation.
And now your host, Congressman Tom Latham.
Over the course of the last decade, the military has grown increasingly reliant on the citizen soldiers of the National Guard. But the benefits for those serving in the National Guard haven't always kept up with our growing dependence on their service. These soldiers often serve multiple tours of duty in Iraq and Afghanistan, and it's imperative their health coverage and retirement pay is appropriate for their sacrifices. Joining me today to talk about the National Guard is General Gus Hargett of the National Guard Association of the United States. Welcome. It's great to have you with us today.
And, great to be here.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from and where'd you grow up?
Well, I grew up in West Tennessee. I'm a graduate of Cumberland University in Lebanon, Tennessee. Joined the Guard in 1962 and retired this year after 47 years in the Guard. Did almost 20 years of active duty and retired as the Adjutant General for the Tennessee National Guard.
Oh, great, great. Tell us a little bit of the history of the National Guard. When did it start?
Well, America's oldest military service, established December 13, 1636, actually with the authority of the General Court in Boston. And they created 4 militia regiments, really to defend against the Indians. And so you can see what it's evolved to over this length of time. Now with about 470,000 guardsmen around the world and doing missions every day.
You know, the world changed in 9/11, 2001. What can you tell us about what the Guard, their main purpose before 9/11, and has that changed much since?
I think most people viewed the Guard as a strategic reserve, and we always talked about what would happen in Europe, the Fulda Gap and all of the other things. And so I think on 9/11 we realized how dependent we are on the citizen soldier. And I'm one of those that believes that we made a mistake in Vietnam. When you mobilize the Guard and reserves, you call out the American people, you mobilize people from every community across America. And I think people understand the war because America goes to war when you call out the Guard and reserve. We didn't do that in Vietnam. America never went to war, and I think we learned from that mistake. And I think on 9/11, I think when we went to war, everybody understood that the Guard was going to war. I think most guardsmen always understood that if America went to war, that we would go to war. But I think a lot of people only looked at the Guard as a force that we would use in the states for flooding, like in Iowa, for the oil spill in New Orleans, for the border security in Arizona, and those type things. So I think the Guardsmen understood it better than the American public, but I believe now that the American public understands that what a treasure the National Guard is.
Well, it is, and they do such a great job both at home and obviously serving overseas. But why would someone join the National Guard rather than the regular military?
It gives you an opportunity to have a civilian life and still serve your country and state. And we're the only force out there that can serve both at home in a state status and abroad in a federal status. So it's an opportunity to do that. I think we have some of the best benefits in the country. Every state's got a little bit different program, great federal benefits, a retirement at 20 years. I mean, don't draw it to your 60, but and then I think there's the camaraderie among the Guard. You get people in units that stay there together for a long, long time. And they become a family, they become a team, and people want to be part of a team.
One of the great things I think about the Guard, they bring expertise to the military on the deployments. I know some of the units, say in Iowa, some of the engineering units, things, they actually know how to go over and build things. They've got real life world experience. They seem to be innovative. They're not maybe always restricted as the regular military in what they can do and what they can't do.
Well, I think we bring a skill set that you don't find in the young people in the U.S. Army or the U.S. Air Force, and not to make light of those guys, but it's a skill set that you use in everyday life. And I'll give you an example. When I was the adjutant general in the 278th from Tennessee, went to Iraq the first time, a lady from Knoxville came to see me, and she was actually an Iraqi citizen who had she was an electrical engineer, and she had volunteered a year of her time to go to Iraq to help them work on the electrical grid and to restore electricity. And she just came by to tell me what a great job the Tennessee Guard guys were doing over there. And she gave me an example of a man who worked for the Knoxville Utility District, who helped them restore water to a village that they thought they couldn't do. And it was a very simple thing, only because that's what he did in civilian life.
Yeah, it really brings, I think about the requirements to get in the Guard. Now, it's not just young people that go in. I mean, you have men, women, you've got different ages. What are the requirements or restrictions, I guess?
It's far more restrictive than it used to be, but everybody's got a high school diploma. You got to make certain scores in different categories to get into different MOSs or occupational skill set. So it is restrictive, and I guess the age limit now is 18 to 45 or something. We've kind of changed that upper limit several times. But by and large, what I've seen since 9/11, and I had talked to the Adjutant General of Iowa the other day, and we were talking about the age of the Guard now. And when I became the Adjutant General in Tennessee, the average age of a Tennessee Guardsman was 39.1. When I left there, a year before I left, it was 31.6. And when I was talking to Tim Orr the other day, Tim says he believes, and he hadn't checked it lately, that I was probably in the 27, 28 range. So that just tells you, since 9/11, how many young men and women have joined the Guard, and how many of the older people have retired.
It is amazing to visit the units and to see the all ages of people that are there doing a terrific job. Iowa just is in the process right now of a major deployment to Afghanistan. Can you tell the viewers about what are the different roles of the Guard, say, in Iraq and Afghanistan? You do a lot of different things, I know.
Well, your brigade combat team's going to Afghanistan, right. and as I've read up on what they're going to do and talked to the Iowa guys, this will be the largest deployment of Iowa Guardsmen since World War II. And I believe about 3,400 in the brigade combat team, and they have deployed about 14,000 Army and Air Guardsmen in Iowa to date since 9/11. But this will be the large one. And a brigade combat team occupies space in Afghanistan. They will be responsible for everything from controlling that space, the security missions within that space, dealing with the ANA, dealing with the Afghan National Police, dealing with the local citizens. So it's all encompassing. And I also understand embedded in the Iowa team is an agriculture team to teach them within that province how to farm. And I did one of those in Tennessee just before we left, and that will be very valuable to the Afghan people. What we found in Tennessee was that there's a thirst for knowledge. They want to know how to do things better. From the Soviet invasion, a lot of the infrastructure was destroyed there. You know, they used to be able to irrigate, and they did a lot more farming than they do, and so they've lost a lot of those skills. But you know, I guess everything that any regular soldier and combat team is going to do, the Iowa National Guard's going to do that.
And they bring additional expertise along with it.
Absolutely.
What do you think? We have a lot of concern, I think, about the tempo or the number of deployments and whether or not the federal government is supporting the Guard as it should be. Do you have any comments about, you know, what if you're trying to maintain a civilian job and it puts a real stress not only on that individual who's being deployed, but also that employer that keeps that space open for them, that job open for them when they come back. What about the tempo of the deployments?
You know, I guess you could probably get a different answer from almost everybody you talk to, and I will tell you that every state is different. You know, a lot of it depends on the economic situation within the state. It depends on what all of these young men and women do. When I talked to Tim the other day, what I found was that when I was in Tennessee, we had very few employer problems. We had probably more family problems than employer problems, and they weren't generated by the deployment as much as they are financial, family issues that go on while they're deployed. What I found in Tennessee, and I believe Iowa was pretty similar, Tennessee's maybe a little bit bigger guard-wise, but your family support groups are great out in Iowa. You're supported by your employers, great in Iowa. So I don't see the tempo as being a bad thing. I'll tell you, if you talk to the average guardsman today, what he would say to you, the average guy, hey, we kind of like this op tempo. We like this 1 and 4, 1 and 5, or whatever that is. And when we start to draw down, don't put us back on the shelf. We want to stay involved.
Well, and to maintain the level of training and to,
exactly,
all the time.
And the funding that goes with that.
What other challenges do you see facing the Guard today? I mean, as far as the deployments, but talking to a lot of the Guard families, that the soldier, the man or woman that's being deployed, they know what their mission is over there. They've got their job that they do every day. It's really hard back at home because that's really where the family is. When
I was the adjutant general in Tennessee, I used to make speeches around the state to the family support groups, and I used to always tell them, you got the hard job. We get to go to war with our buddies. You're going over there with somebody you've been in the Guard with for 10 years. You know that your friends always got your back. But we've got these young men and women who are spouses with young children scattered all across America. Some of them have never had to manage budgets. Some of them have never had to manage children alone. Some of them have never even had a bank account, until they got in the Guard and had to manage those things. So that's what I found was the hardest for them to do consistently, was to be able to manage the business back home, at the same time worry about their husband. And I always thought that our responsibility as a state was to take care of the families. Because if those young men and women can go to war, then we should be able to take care of their families back home. And I believe the Guard does that probably better than anybody. But what makes that hard is how much we're scattered across every community. If the 101st Airborne out of Fort Campbell goes to war, then most of those families are congregated in the Clarksville area. So they're taken care of by the base and so forth. But what I also found, a lot of active duty soldiers' families go home, and they go home to rural America, and are taken care of by the Guard family support groups.
That's incredible, and all the support groups are just amazing.
They are,
and the great service. It's just as important at home as what the mission is overseas. There's currently there's a glitch as far as retirement pay. The months of deployment have to be in a full year, and it's different somewhat than what the active duty members, military members have. Tell us about the glitch and how we're going to fix it.
Well, first, our retirement should be different than the active guys. I mean, we ask the active guys 24/7, 365 a year. But what we've seen since 9/11 is that as the op tempo has changed for the Guard, we're still in a Cold War mindset, the way we've always done our retirement. It's been 60 years old for a Guardsman to start drawing his retirement, I guess, since we formed the Civil Service. And in the beginning, it was kind of tied to the Civil Service laws. But at one time, then I think it was changed where you could retire in Civil Service at 55, but the Guard was never retired. Changed to be able to retire like that. And then, I guess year before last, we passed another law that allowed everybody who's mobilized since January of 2008 that for every 90-day period within a fiscal year, they get 90 days credit toward retirement reduced from age 60. Well, the first thing I think is wrong with that is we passed a law that includes the men and women that are deploying from 2008 into the future. But for those people who fought the war from 2001 until 2008, they're not covered. The other thing is, if you mobilize in September, and you come home in August, then you're probably only going to get credit for 2 quarters.
Right.
So we should change that to says every 90 days you're mobilized should count for 90 days.
Have nothing to do with the fiscal year.
It shouldn't have anything to do with
Right.
fiscal years.
Right.
So, and the other thing that we should do is date it back to 9/11.
Yeah.
I mean, let's look at all of these young men and women that we've done, and I think we should overhaul our whole system. You know, nobody wants to look at what the cost is or what the benefits are, and I've talked to several people about it. But you know, we're going to reach a point in time where we pay a lot of bonuses for people to stay in the Guard and do other things, and I think that we could offer an incentive for every 2 years that you stay in the Guard beyond 20. Based upon your unique qualifications and whether the Adjutant General and the state needs your services, that you could reduce that retirement age by 1 year. And so consequently, if you stayed 30 years, then you could retire at age 55, and you wouldn't have to pay bonuses to keep them. You could keep the skill set that you want, and the experienced leaders that you're sending to Iraq and Afghanistan today could stick around for a long time.
You know, the health care has been a huge issue in the Guard, and we made some changes here as far as the availability for health care benefits for people not just deployed, but also if they're drilling at home. Do you want to talk about those changes and what that means?
Well,
to the
first,
Guard?
I got to tell you, we've made great strides with health care in the Guard. I mean, TRICARE is a great program, and we should thank Congress for it every day. It gives the Guardsman the opportunity to sign up for TRICARE. He can stay within one system as long as he stays in the Guard. And I suppose eventually we're going to implement the gray area retiree where the guy leaves the Guard, he can buy in, and I think it was supposed to be done by 1 October. And now DOD is asking for a little bit more time to implement that, but made great strides. I would say that the one thing that I see is, as you ready a force the size of a brigade out of Iowa, you naturally have medical issues with those. And if you can identify those issues early, then you can get those people fixed, especially with dental and all the other things. But we now allow them to come on TRICARE 90 days before the deployment, and I think most of us in the Guard think that probably 6 months would be better, and then probably 6 months after the deployment to allow you to go through all of the health care assessments, make sure there's not anything wrong with the people. What we do now at the end of that 90 days, we just kind of push them off to VA, and then we want to blame the VA healthcare system for them not being taken care of. But I personally would like to see 180 days pre-deployment and 180 days post-deployment. I believe we'd take a lot better care of our men and women who are deployed.
It is a huge issue with even the dental care, and that's one of the medical reasons a lot of people aren't able to be deployed.
What I found when we mobilized our first large unit in Tennessee and right after 9/11, the biggest health issue we had were teeth. We had more non-deployables for dental reasons than any other single item.
And they actually do have access under, it's an additional cost, but to dental under TRICARE now also, which they didn't before. But then, what about educational benefits in the Guard?
You know, every state's a little bit different. I was talking to Tim Moore the other day, and I believe Iowa pays about 70% now. So I think if you're an Army guy in Iowa, with what the federal government pays and what the state of Iowa pays, you're probably getting 100%. The Air Guard doesn't have quite the same benefits that the Army does, but great educational benefits. You know, I looked at what we did in Tennessee, and we were able to pay about 100% for the Army and about 50% for the Air Guard when I was there. You know, obviously it would be nice if everybody had 100%, but it's still a pretty good incentive to be in the Guard. It allows a young man to go to school, be in the Guard, draw a check, qualify for VA benefits. So a lot of benefits with education.
And it's absolutely critical for their careers to get that kind of education. Yeah, going back to the deployment that we have, like you said, about 3,400, more than that actually, Iowa Guards people going off in Afghanistan. How does the preparation, you're a former Adjutant General, what do you have to do to prepare for a deployment like that? Well,
the first thing you need to do is set your team, and then you've got to figure out who's going with you and who's not. And then the adjutant general will certify every individual skill set, and you can't believe how much detail they will go into to certify that every individual soldier has gone through every one of those individual skill training missions. They're certified on those missions. And at the end of the day, all of those individual items that he must accomplish pre-mob will be certified by the adjutant general that's been done. And I tell you, that's a heck of a responsibility for a man to say, I'm going to trust my guys and make sure that's done, because it's your name that goes on that piece of paper when that young man or woman goes to war. So I can assure you the adjutant general takes that serious. Every unit we did out of Tennessee, we would identify down to the person by rank, name, serial number. If he didn't get to training, we made sure that happens. And then he will get it post-mob when he goes to, in the case of the Iowa Guard, they're going to Camp Shelby. And if he doesn't get it at home station, he'll get it at Camp Shelby. So it's not a lack of training. I'll tell you, that's the one thing that First Army does very well. The Guard works very well with them. Those skill sets are done. Great training team at Camp Shelby, Mississippi, which is where I was going to do and be certified as a brigade combat team. Then they will go to the National Training Center at Fort Irwin, I believe, world-class training center. So I would just say that when the brigade out of Iowa goes to war, the people in Iowa should feel good that they will be certified to go to war, and they will be as good as any brigade in the U.S. Army when they depart.
Absolutely. What about when they get home? And we talked a little bit about the employers, but what's the law as far as that job being there for them when they come back?
Of course, they're protected by USERRA.
Right.
So, I mean, the employer has to hire them back. What I saw in Tennessee wasn't necessarily the employer's fault that they didn't want to hire them back. But, you know, we've gone through hard economic times. Some employers have gone out of business. Some have just abolished those jobs. And so if they've abolished that job, then they're not covered by USERRA. But I think the unemployment rate is a little bit higher for guardsmen than it is in the average across the community. But I'll also tell you that I think a lot of that are guardsmen who want to keep doing guard stuff. And then you'll find that these young men come back, they want to take a 90-day break, and then they'd like to go back to work for the Guard, and they do some other stuff. So they'll draw unemployment for a little while. But what I've seen across Tennessee, and I don't expect Iowa was any different than that, hiring a guardsman is a good thing. I will say that in certain businesses, some people may not want to hire a guardsman, knowing they're going to be gone occasionally. But what I found in Tennessee was it was more difficult on the Air Guard side than it was on the Army side, because the predictability for what the Army guys are going to do is a little bit better. You know, 1 in 3, 1 in 4, 1 in 5. And the Air Guard, the way they did the AEFs, could be gone 90 days this year, 90 days the next year. And so a lot of them volunteered to do those AEFs. And I had one employer tell me in Memphis one time, he said, you know, I'll continue to hire Army guys, but I can't hire Air Guard guys because I don't have that predictability. So, you know, the big deal is we need to give the employers and the families and the soldier a predictable life. He needs to understand what that life is. The employer needs to understand when he's coming back to work. If we tell a young man we're going to mobilize you on September the 15th, you're going to be home on August the 31st, the employer should have every right to expect that. So I think if we give them predictability, we will have problems, but not huge problems. And I don't think we had huge employer issues in Tennessee, and in talking to my friends from Iowa, I don't think you do in Iowa either.
No, we have the communities, the employers are very, very supportive of what's going on. Yeah. Is there any program in the Guard for to help find new jobs when they come back?
You know, every state's a little bit different. In Tennessee, when I was there, we had a deal with the Department of Employment Security. We had partnerships with some businesses that we did partnerships with that would hire guardsmen after they deployed. Nashville Police Department, for instance, we had a partnership with them. And a lot of military police in and around, and they hired a lot of our people. So I think you'll find that each state has developed their own way of doing that. We got employer support of the Guard and Reserve groups out there across the states that will help them find jobs, communicate with employers what great people they are. So, you know, they're drug-free, they're well-trained, they're disciplined. So there are people out there looking to hire people like that.
Well, what can Iowans, the American people, do to really help Guardsmen as they, either before they're deployed, while they're deployed, come back? Are different things that communities can do outside of what we've talked about?
I would say that what every guardsman would like to hear is a thank you occasionally. Right. Thank you for what you do for our country. Thank you for what you do for our state. You're going to do that for us, and we'll take care of your family while you're gone. We welcome you back, and you can rest assured that. And I'm going to give you an example of that. Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company, and I'm not plugging Goodyear tires or anything, but we deployed a lot of people out of a local community in West Tennessee at Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. At the end of the day, I went to visit those guys. When they left, they hung a flag over every workstation. They notified every family member that if they need something, call Goodyear Tire and Rubber. If they had a problem with their sink at their house, the commode at the house, Goodyear Tire and Rubber would send somebody over, repair those for them, and if nobody else mowed their yard, Goodyear Tire and Rubber did that. So, those type things are invaluable, and it makes the family feel important to the community. It makes the soldier feel important to his community. So I would just say support the families and the soldiers while they're off doing the mission of our nation.
Yeah, and the unique thing about the Guard and deployments, it can really affect a community, this community, a lot more than that one. If it's centralized, that's where the Guard's...
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you get into, now in the case of Iowa, 3,400 people, you'll touch almost every community in Iowa.
Yeah, right.
But when you go do a local unit, that's a military police unit in my hometown, Murfreesboro, they just got back out of Iraq, you get 170, 80 people that are mostly consolidated within that one community. So you touch all of the law enforcement agencies there, you touch the jails, the prisons, so you get a lot of their employers. But I'll tell you, the support that they get out there is remarkable.
I just have about a minute left here, I think, but give us, if someone's interested in joining the Guard, give me your commercial here. What should they do information-wise to...
I'm a lifelong guardsman, so I've always recruited for the Guard. My dad was a guardsman after World War II, passed away last year, drew his retirement for 27 years. To me, the greatest organization in America is the Guard. The greatest treasure in America is the Guard. So for anybody who wants to be a part of a world-class team, call 1-800-GO-GUARD.
Okay, fantastic. And I really appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you for what you do for not just the men and women in Iowa, but for what you do for our guardsmen across America.
Well, it's my honor. They are tremendous assets, resources, and we could not be fighting the war on terror if it was not for the National Guard.
And it's important to us to be supported on the Hill like we are.
Yeah. Members of the National Guard are serving our nation across the globe. But the benefits given to them for their sacrifices don't always reflect their profound sacrifice and service. That's why it's so important that we continually evaluate and update the benefits promised to these brave men and women. I'd like to thank my guests one more time, and I hope you'll tune in next time on the Congressional Report.
From the nation's capital in Washington, D.C., this has been the Congressional Report with Iowa Congressman Tom Latham. Have a question, comment, or concern? Congressman Latham wants to hear from you.